Okay, we're on. So, Paul,
Yes.
tell me a bit about your martial arts background, specifically jiu-jitsu, how you got started.
I actually got started in jiu-jitsu after I got out of college and had my first job, and I wanted to study a martial art. And there was another guy in the office who I wound up talking with just through chance, and he said that he studied jiu-jitsu at what was then the Towson YMCA, and that that was he described it to me, and that was enough for me to give it a try. Okay, and it was. I think I went to one or two classes when I really felt that this was right for me. And it wasn't long after I got bitten by the bug, and I really loved the instructor at the time, Dennis McCurdy, now retired, who I eventually wound up taking over for. But the gentleman that I worked with, he and I wound up pairing off and being each other's partner, and we worked out pretty exclusively for the next 4 or 5 years until we both got our first degree black belts together. Okay, it was wonderful memories, and I learned from him. He learned from me. It was excellent, and we're talking. This was 1986.
Going way back.
Going way back, yeah.
It feels like pre BJJ as far
Oh
as
yes,
impact.
absolutely. Pre-Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, pre-Steven Seagal.
That's incredible to think of World Without Skull and having the movie support of
Yes.
soft martial arts. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I learned about the AJA, founded by George Kirby and Bill Fromm. How Dennis, my instructor, was taught by Fromm, and the various books that George Kirby wrote, which were excellent. I bought every book he had, and I read them cover to cover multiple times. And I learned from the books, I learned from the seminars, I learned from my instructors, I learned from the other black belts in the dojo, and I just it became really a passion for me. You know, everything I learned there was also more than one variation to, which my body type, the way I moved, I learned that I could take a technique and make it my own.
Yeah.
And by that I mean make the technique, modify it slightly or do it slightly different so that it worked for me. Okay, there was no one way. Okay, I can do the same technique as anybody else, but I did it in a way that I was effective with it.
And I'm guessing that you've seen people with different body types, different ages, different abilities, where jiu-jitsu's been adaptable for them. They've been able to find their own favorite techniques. And
Absolutely. They have, and later as an instructor, whenever there was a student that had difficulty with a technique the way I taught them, I learned how to modify it for them in such a way that they could effectively do the technique and be successful.
that's so important, especially if teaching women.
Oh yes.
Just
Oh, yes.
that's girls and adult women who are inherently almost always not as strong physically as men,
Yes.
and that adaptability of the art for their lack of that ability to compensate through strength that they could develop through technique and leverage.
I also have taught a lot of women's self-defense, and similar to what I'm going to be doing later when I teach the seminar, okay, is teach people ways to do things that work for them. Okay, how can a person without the upper body strength, let's say, be effective? And a lot of that is techniques. A lot of that is knowing where to attack or defend the person that's trying to hurt you. Okay, and at that point, you don't get hurt, and you can either subdue the individual or be able to effect an escape, so that you don't get hurt by that attacker.
So that sounds like the focus of your presentation today. Anything else you want to talk about there? I mean, that encapsulates a lot of the street-based self-defense, the practical application of what we do, compared with, and this is not a put down BJJ at all or any other sporting application, like judo. Judo is the old school sports evolution of jiu-jitsu into techniques that aren't going to be lethal or kill someone or break limbs or gouge eyes. Do you see value? You see the ability to perpetuate these other techniques that are not sporting, that are real street self-defense, kind of ruthless techniques? Or
well, what I like to teach, and it's what I'm going to do today, and I have a bit of a reputation for it, is to take the traditional judo, the traditional jiu-jitsu, and make it practical. Okay, apply it in such a way that it will actually work on an individual who is attacking you and wants to do you bodily harm. Okay, and you're not, I'm sorry to say, it is extremely difficult to, shall we say, dispatch an attacker without causing them at least some sort of discomfort or potential injury. And I'm not too concerned about that, because they were trying to hurt you. Okay? And in order to defend yourself, sometimes you have to fight fire with fire.
No question.
And some people are just so polite in that they don't want to hurt anybody. Okay? Then you're going to end up being hurt yourself.
And we can. There's one example of the person right behind you, Jorge Ushiba, the Aikido tendency to try to minimize harm to the person. Although it has many practical possibilities, there's a desire to limit those, because you don't want to hurt them, or you want to stress a philosophical application of an art, whereas jiu-jitsu does what needs to be done.
You do what needs to be done, okay, to keep yourself from being hurt, injured, or killed. If somebody's trying to hurt me, I'm not really worried that I'm going to hurt them, because if that's what I have to do to protect myself, I will do it.
Have you yourself had instances where you've had to apply your own knowledge of this, or students who've successfully done this?
I have had to apply what I've known. The first time was 2 weeks before I tested for first degree black belt. I visited a friend in the hospital in downtown Baltimore, and I noticed this guy was following me. So I crossed the street, walking back to my car. He crossed the street. I crossed the street back. He crossed the street. And I thought, well, I'm going to be vulnerable when I'm getting into my car, so I'm going to stop and confront him now. And so I let him catch up to me. And the reason I did that was I couldn't really do anything if he was standing 20 feet away from me, because I didn't have a knife or any other weapon. Okay, so I needed to use my hands. And when I turned around and confronted him, and in a direct manner said, well, what do you want? Okay. At that point, I had confidence in my own abilities. I had confidence in myself that I could defend myself if this individual attacked me. And there wasn't any fear. There was a little bit of apprehension, but because I had practiced and trained for years at that point. I I think that what I did was probably the least objectionable alternative.
So did you have to make contact, physical contact? or was it
Actually,
enough?
no.
So it's verbal
Because I
communication.
turned and demanded to know what he wanted,
Mhm.
I intimidated him enough
Oh.
that he didn't attack me and went away.
So your verbal
Oh, yes.
verbal application was critical, and that's drummed into newer students that this is not an art that exists in some physical vacuum. That you want to use whatever you can, and often that's your
Oh, yeah.
voice or screaming if you're a woman. There are people around
Yeah.
who might. So that's an excellent example where you didn't have to resort to the physical.
I didn't have to, no.
Mhm.
I was prepared to, fully
Yeah.
prepared to.
Hmm.
Okay. The other time was a couple of years later. I was in a nightclub and I accidentally bumped into a guy in the nightclub and I spilled his beer all over him. And he pointed his finger at me and told me he was going to, well, he said he was going to kick my ass.
Right.
And I believed him. And I did the technique you and I know is Tainagi.
Yeah.
And I dropped him so fast I scared myself.
It
I
was-
genuinely did.
So a technique that students learn in the first
day.
year. Yeah.
They learn it the first day, and I'd done it thousands of times, tens of thousands of times, maybe.
Mhm.
Okay, and you do it without thinking about it. Your body knows what to do.
And this guy did you break his wrist or did he respond by falling or how did
Oh, he went down like a ton of bricks.
terrific.
And I don't know if I broke his wrist or not. Okay, but I was so shocked
that it was so effective,
how
so
effective
quickly?
it was that the idiot, I helped him back up to his feet.
Bought him a beer or
I didn't buy him
Sorry
a beer.
about that.
I took somebody else's beer off the bar and stuck it in his good hand. I'm like, you'll be okay, buddy. And then I left the place.
well, that's a happy ending. Very, very karmically positive for you.
That gave me a confidence that you really can't get another way.
That's to have gone through that and have it end up as well as it did. That really that testifies to it. Let me ask you the last kind of big open-ended question is: what are your thoughts on the future of the type of jiu-jitsu that we do? It's not a narrow path that we have to jiu-jitsu. I think it's the broadest one because we can do anything. We're not limited by sporting applications as well. What are your thoughts on traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu as you?
Well, traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu is what I learned. I also studied karate for a long time as well. Brazilian jiu-jitsu kind of wasn't around when I started. Okay, so I learned what was available to me, and it turned out that I really enjoyed it. Now, because of that, it's what I enjoy. It's what I think is very effective, most effective, really. Believe it or not, the U.S. Army taught Japanese jiu-jitsu to soldiers before World War II.
Really?
And then during World War II, because that was what the Army felt was effective at the time. Okay, it wasn't until later, after World War II, that there was a bit of a change in philosophy with the U.S. Army. What became more emphasized, probably because of the Korean War, was Taekwondo.
So more
Which is
punching,
Korean,
kicking,
yes.
hard edge stuff
Right.
rather than joint locks, throwing.
Right.
Huh.
The stuff that the Army taught before the Korean War was, how to throw an opponent over your head, how to, basically take him down quickly, and I
I
we
wonder
just
what's.
say continue?
I'd love to know the background of that, why that transition happened, and what the thinking was, and why it was found to be more efficient to punch or kick.
I really don't know. I have a suspicion that, the older generation left the Army and retired. And the generation taught what they learned while they were stationed in Korea.
Right. Just that immediate cultural influence.
But as far as where I like to go with the classes I teach, okay, is I teach the art form, the katas, the techniques, okay, so that you learn the basics, and then I show people how to actually apply them in a practical situation. And that was always the thing that was most interesting to me. Okay, how you can take these wonderful techniques, the throws, the joint locks, the various nerve techniques, and what have you, and use them in a practical setting.
That's so significant. And as you're a longtime student years ago, I remember the emphasis you would put on repetition, repeating throws,
Yes.
and it came away feeling like judo-like, as judo emphasizes throws, but it originates, of course, in jiu-jitsu. But I think this emphasis on the basics as what you're likely to turn to in a real confrontation, as like Te Naga, as you were talking about.
Right. I remember my old high school wrestling coach who used to tell us boys in high school, you win with the basics.
Yeah.
And he drilled those. And I internalized it because I found it successful. Okay. And I like to take those basics, okay, like you had mentioned, the Te Nagi, okay, and the hip throws, okay, and you can do those with your partner working out in class, where you can lay their body down after a hip throw in such a way that the fall is easy for them, they can bounce right back up, and you can do it again, and that is the fun part. That's the part where you both get a lot of practice, you both learn, okay, and you don't hurt each other. And then that same technique, that same throwing technique, you can alter the way you take them down, okay, and you don't spread out the force over their body so they don't get hurt. You focus that force onto one part of their body, okay, like their shoulder or hip or something like that, even their head, okay, such that it will incapacitate them, it will hurt them. Okay? And in that way, you didn't kill them, but they cannot attack you anymore.
And that's an ongoing philosophical and practical question. And this will be the last one, but addressing the question of using really lethal or damaging techniques like eye gouging or nerve techniques or joint breaking or small joint manipulation in the case of Tony Maynard or Wally J.
Wally J was a master, yeah.
How if you could maybe give some ideas on how to apply those really ruthless and really potentially dangerous techniques, be ready to use them but not hurt people, and how do you train to use them?
Okay. Yeah, you need to study for a prolonged period of time, developing the basics. And then as you progress, say maybe to the brown belt level, that's the time when you can begin to learn how to apply these techniques in such a way. And the difference is small. The difference is, inches or even, or an inch, okay, or the way you shift your balance or what have you, okay, to cause enough of a force to be parted.
And it's with experience that you gain the knowledge of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you how to do it. I can show you how to do it. But until you have developed enough skill, it's not going to work. It's going to be meaningless to a new student. Okay, it takes practice. You have to work it.
And we guess there's the potential for danger if you take students who are a year or two into it and they start applying very dangerous techniques without really having the sensitivity to anatomy that they need to have.
Exactly. I will, I'm cautious about whether or not I teach a student something that they're maybe not ready for.
Right.
Okay. If they are ready for it, okay, fine.
And that's a very subjective thing, I guess.
It is, but it does come with experience. Okay. And that was how nobody, well, some people, some of the masters, like Wally J or Tony Maynard, they, I learned from them on how to do some of these techniques. And Dennis McCurdy, of course. But some of it was my own tweaking, if you will, so that I found I developed a feel for how far to go with what is in essence the same technique everybody gets taught, but how hard do I push that technique? And that is based on the size of your opponent, the strength of your opponent, whether or not you're in a situation where it's not working out in a dojo for fun. Okay, you know where you've developed over time where that line is to go beyond it if you have to, and if you don't, you never do.
This seems to underscore the importance of old school in-person training as indispensable.
Oh, I view it as indispensable. Yeah.
Where jiu-jitsu has that sort of baked in because unlike karate and other harder forms where you can do kata individually and you can work with videotapes without other people, that sense of touch.
Judo always takes two. Jiu-jitsu always takes two.
Yeah.
The grappling arts always take two. And, as long as you have two willing people that are motivated and willing to help each other get better, you've got it.
Consenting adults or consenting children, it's all good.
I was asked by the YMCA years ago, could I take kids as low as 8?
Yeah.
And I wasn't really enthusiastic about that idea.
Yeah.
Okay? Because younger children don't have the attention span. But I wound up having 2 young boys, 8 years old, and they were just naturals at it. I taught them to do stuff, and they did it like grown adults. I mean, they were fantastic.
And they had the maturity level.
And they had the maturity and everything, yeah.
I worry. There's the general saying. I don't know how legitimate it is, but the harder martial arts, meaning the punching and kicking of karate and taekwondo, are more easy to get most children into, versus the subtleties of judo. Do you think there's some truth to that? Or?
I think there is. I think there's a lot of truth to that because in karate and taekwondo and what have you, it's easier for younger people to do because it's see the move, do the move.
Right.
Okay, just do what I'm doing. You got the basics.
Right.
Whereas in judo, jiu-jitsu, aikido, what have you, it's see these 3 moves, put them together into a technique.
Right.
Okay, and some people aren't ready for that until they're a little older.
Right.
Okay, I've had teenagers in my class that were not ready for that, and yet those 2 8-year-old boys, they were just great. They were wonderful.
They're exceptional. It makes you wonder what they're up to now. But I hope they follow it through with that, showing that level of talent. The last thing I'll ask. I know I keep saying this is the last thing, but this is really.
That's okay. Keep asking them.
Yeah, this is going in some good areas, and I think it's valuable. But I think, given the potential deadliness of some jiu-jitsu techniques, because there's an emphasis on choking and strangling,
Yes.
and that's taught. I don't know how early you would do. I know we do defenses from rear naked chokes and all sorts of chokes, and the application of strangles to get the carotid arteries. And I worry sometimes about showing maybe an immature audience that, and then them demonstrating something on the school ground and potentially hurting some. Does that weigh on you, or have you ever seen that misused, or is there a sense of responsibility that these kids have?
I have never seen or heard of that happening, and I am more discerning into what techniques I teach individuals, regardless of age. I make an assessment that at this point it's based on experience, but I make an assessment of, is this person mature? Is this person stable? Okay, with, shall we say, individuals that are less than 18 years of age, okay, I preface things very carefully. Okay, this is it's a very effective technique. Okay, and you only use this under the most dire of circumstances. In this dojo, we're going to practice it because it's part of jiu-jitsu and you need to know it. And I lay out the rules. Okay, this is how you apply the technique. This is how you, this is when you stop the technique. Okay, and what I usually do is, you two people that are doing this technique together, you get to do it on each other. So if you are hurting your opponent, well, you're going to get it back. And it's kind of an implied threat, but I've found it to be effective.
Yeah.
You two are responsible for each other's well-being.
And I guess there's the need, which I'm sure you've taken into account, of how it may take one person 5 seconds to pass out if their carotid arteries are suppressed. I mean, that's...
I do not teach children,
Yeah.
and by children I mean 17 and younger, to choke somebody out.
Right.
Okay. I teach them how to apply the technique, but I watch them like a hawk. And, 1 second, 2 seconds, then release.
Right. Right.
Okay? And that way you are able to practice the form. You're able to learn the technique, but you're not going to hurt anybody in the dojo.
So critical. And then how to emphasize what could happen. I don't know.
Yes.
You don't want to... I know there are some extremist dojos where passing out is part of the training. It's a rite of passage where you...
I get that. I understand. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand why they do it, and I think that that is something more important for grown adults to know.
Right. Good.
And I've been very, very fortunate. I've had some great instructors. I have studied a fantastic art that I took to it right away like a duck takes to water.
And stuck with it for what, 30s, 40s?
38 years so far. 38 years. It's just, and I met wonderful, wonderful people, friends for a lifetime like you.
Right. Definitely. And come to some interesting places.
Yeah.
Vegas to do this, to share your knowledge here. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you for
you're
this.
welcome.
I thought this was going to be a quick few minutes, but we got into some really interesting passages, and I think this will be of value. So thank you very much,
Thank
Paul.
you, Tom.
Yep.